Good evening. The mourning has begun around the world for Pope Paul VI, leader of 600 million Roman Catholics, who died this afternoon at 3:40 p.m. Eastern Time after suffering a heart attack. The attack came late this morning as the Pope was in bed listening to Mass at his summer residence some 15 miles south of Rome. As word spread of the Pope's heart attack, crowds began to gather outside the gates of Castel Gandolfo. Inside, the Pope was given oxygen to aid his breathing, and the last rites of the Catholic Church were administered. Death came to Pope Paul just 5 hours later, in the 15th year of his reign. Pope Paul's health had been failing for a long time, and only yesterday doctors ordered a complete rest because of a flare-up of the Pope's arthritic condition, which had troubled him for years. The Pope himself had talked of his approaching death, and only this past week he spoke of meeting God after death, which the Pope said cannot be far away. The reaction to the death of Pope Paul VI has now begun. John Cardinal Cody, the Archbishop of Chicago, remembered Pope Paul.
I suppose that everyone would think, and surely the death of his very good friend Mauro must have helped to bring on his end. I suppose it was his suffering at seeing Italy so changed, and perhaps he will best be remembered for his great efforts to bring about peace and understanding. As you know, more than once he had offered himself. Even when Mauro was kidnapped, he had offered himself as an exchange victim for the terrorists who took this good man. They were very close personal friends and had worked together for the betterment of Italy and to preserve the peace and liberty there that these good people enjoyed. But I suppose when history is judging him, it will say that he was really the greatest Nobel Prize winner of the century, because he exerted every effort to try to bring about peace, even lately in the Middle East.
John Cardinal Cody of Chicago. ABC Stuart Lawrence is in Rome. We have him on the telephone now. Stuart, could you tell us something about the mood in Rome this evening, especially around the Vatican?
Well, Tom, the mood here in Rome is rather strange. The death of Pope Paul has been accepted with very little emotion. There were no large crowds in St. Peter's Square when I was there just a while ago, just the usual Sunday night strollers. But I did see one small group of British tourists who had come to see the Pope and, of course, did not, praying for the repose of his soul. Romans generally appear to have accepted the death of an 80-year-old Pope as a routine fact of life, especially in view of the repeated statements in the last month by Pope Paul that he would not live much longer. But there was, of course, the initial shock at the news of his death, only because his last illness came unexpectedly. It was brief, and the end was sudden, all in the space of a relatively few hours. There was no long death agony, so there was insufficient time for Romans to build to a state of mourning. Romans, in fact, had never really fully warmed up to Pope Paul because he was not gregarious and grandfatherly like his predecessor, Pope John. John, of course, was loved. Pope Paul was only liked, and he was respected and appreciated. And this is reflected in the mood here in Rome tonight.
Thank you very much. Stuart Lawrence reporting from Rome by telephone. Pope Paul VI was born Giovanni Battista Montini on September 26, 1897 in northern Italy. Throughout his youth, his health was poor, and he was often forced to interrupt his studies to recuperate at home. After the death of Pope John XXIII, it took 3 days for the College of Cardinals to elect him as the 262nd Pontiff of the Catholic Church on June 21, 1963. Frank Reynolds has this report on the Pope's reign.
Pope Paul worked for reunion of the Christian churches. In 1966, he welcomed Michael Ramsey, Archbishop of Canterbury, to the Vatican. 11 years later, another Archbishop of Canterbury, Dr. Donald Coggan, came to Rome and prayed with Pope Paul in the Sistine Chapel. But they conceded there were still serious roadblocks to reunification of their two churches. Paul's dream of Christian unity was unfulfilled, but he left the goal closer for his successor. In the summer of 1967, Paul went to Turkey to see Patriarch Athenagoras of the Orthodox Eastern Rite. The break between the Church of Rome and the Eastern Rite was the earliest major schism of Christianity, resulting in 9 centuries of tension. Paul and Athenagoras called their joint prayer the beginning of a dialogue of love. From Istanbul, Paul visited Ephesus, where St. Paul preached, and where it is said the Virgin Mary spent her last years. That autumn, an operating room was set up in the Vatican. Paul underwent surgery. Roman Catholics the world over waited, and many kept a vigil in St. Peter's Square until it was announced there was no malignancy and the Pope was out of danger. Within a week, the Pope was calling for his staff. He was ready to go back to work, and shortly was ready to travel again.
El Santo Padre, después de su alocución al pueblo rural latinoamericano,
South America has been a predominantly Catholic continent for centuries, but no pope had been there until Paul. In Bogota in 1968, Paul blessed a Eucharistic Congress and opened a conference of South American bishops. Colombia, like much of South America, was in turmoil. Many had hoped Paul would relax the Vatican position against guerrilla action to correct injustice. Instead, he spoke against what he called the theology of violence. But he did endorse the commitment of the bishops to attack the causes of poverty rather than simply its effects.